Hi, my name is Kennedy Job. I am filming for my my research proposal project or poster. For this one, I decided to focus on collegiate athletes and student athletes in particular. Collegiate student athlete utilization of mental health services, their knowledge of interventional help, as well as the retention rates on campus. And so starting with my introduction, mental health is a big stigma around people my age, young adults, who are kind of first developing what certain stressors and triggers in their lives and how that can affect them in mentally and physically and emotionally. Especially, we're able to see more recently the effects of being a student athlete and mentally and the mental correlation that goes along with it. And so um, I wanted to create a project and a research and a study that would kind of help guide students and student athletes to utilize services that are on campus. How can we strengthen? How can we educate students about the services that are on campus and get them into a better place? And so obviously there's a lot of stressors between being a student athlete, the performance pressures in the classroom as well as off and on the field, and how can they balance those two things in a healthy manner, along with the different things that come with being just a young adult and facing new things in their life. The lack of physical access to students and them not knowing about the services also can be kind of a concern for their mental health, and is a concern for the mental health and overall well-being. And so being able to make sure that these services are not only accessible, but are being used by students and student athletes. So the background of this, how I kind of framed all this, the framework behind of this is the amount of studies I've been able to read about this. And so starting with the Moreland Journal of Sports and Health Sciences kind of allowed me to understand that students, and he through his research showed that students were willing to use the services that were on campus. They were willing to participate, willing to go get help. It was just a stigma of going to get help about mental health that kind of stopped students from going. And so also the accessibility of these things, of the services, came from a lack of knowledge from coaches, from people that their students looked up to and would go seek help from, and not being pointed into the right direction. So Pearsall wrote Mental Health and Elite Athletes, Sports Medicine study in 2019. He discussed the overall framework of mental health and the utilization of what was on campus, and making sure that the factors that went into making a strong kind of health service for students, identified and touched all of the bases of what students were facing and making a positive impact on students' lives. He also discussed that once student athletes' mental health kind of declined, so did their willingness to participate in their sport. They didn't want to participate in something that was giving them negativity, that brought them negativity. And so how can we make their mental health be improved, but also the sport itself? What are the factors that the sport is providing, as well as the lack of balance that they might be able to not the lack of balance or not being able to balance? How can we get student athletes to adjust their framework? This is all new to them. Being a student athlete, being able to balance school at a different level, and sports at a different level, definitely is a different stress for them. And so they can be affected by abundance of risk factors. And Chang wrote in his study, discussed the various impacts and the severity of the duration of their career in the sport. And so as well as I tie this into Armstrong's study, he discussed depression in student athletes. Are they a particular at-risk group? And he just discussed how they are at risk, and they're at higher risk because a lot of this is new to them. And so proposed method that I kind of wanted to tap into a little bit more was a population at Texas Lutheran University. They're located in Seguin, Texas, and they have 19 intercollegiate sports across their campus. It's a D3 school and D3 sports division. And it's estimated that 1/3 of their population on campus is student athletes. And so the reason I chose this, I went to that school, played soccer there for 2 years, and I decided to leave. And my experience definitely kind of encouraged me to dig into this a little bit more. So for the data tool that I'd be using would be a cross-sectional survey, and that's how I would gather my research. I'd be collected at a single point in time, and the survey would be self-administered questionnaire. These questions would already be predetermined by myself, and what I'd be interested in looking into is retention, the level of how they would rate their mental health, and if they're receiving help, and if they are, is that help being at service to them. Their overall knowledge of what services are available for them at question. All of these questions would be closed-ended format to kind of keep it neutral and uniformed for all responses. And then I would use Google Forms to keep track of all the responses, as well as how I'd be performing my questionnaire. There's also a unique feature on Google Sheets. It's called Mail Merge. And when sending out these emails, it would let me know what students have opened up their emails, answered the forms, and which ones the email didn't go through. So I'd be able to make sure that if there was an error in email, it would tell me so that I would be able to resend those emails. And then I kind of have wrote out the time frame of collecting data and passing out the surveys to students. The two graphics are from the Journal of Sports Medicine, also in Moreland's research. The overall graphic is just kind of in a way, the athlete's system and the framework that I was discussing earlier. How is the athlete, starting with the athlete, what they're going through, how they're coping. Their coping skills is what he discussed for the athlete. The micro system is coaches, friends, relative, their support system. Exosystem is the individual sport itself, and the macro is the national sporting environment, social media, the things that are bigger than the sport and tie into it. And so also with this survey also with this graphic, I've included a kind of a little snippet from the cross-sectional survey that he used, also quantitative data, and he was seeking what athletes were seeking help, and he was also digging and tapping in a little bit more into the concept of athletes, other athletes' opinions, and the pressure that puts on to individuals. And so he used the surveys as well, and a bigger population of non-student athlete and student athletes, and kind of compared also at the D1 and D3 levels. So the significance of this study, I think, I could go on and on about the significance about the study, but because there's so much that can be utilized, but mainly to have a better understanding of the campus and their overall, what they are offering to students, and analyzing the patterns of relationships and concerns for the retention rates of students in the future and to remain on campus, and my references. So hopefully this was good.